Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Jonscott Turco, very unique name there, just in case you need to track him down by Google. And we're going to be looking at the intersection of excited and scared, and when you're sure it's the right thing to do too. So coming up in this episode, we'll be looking at that, and we'll be looking at the risks of being content with the current state of affairs in your business, how to work with your surroundings when people envy you or think you're crazy, or both, tips on navigating the unconventional life of an entrepreneur, or how he overcame the fear of investing in himself, and also why authenticity is the key to intuition. So welcome, Jonscott.
Thank you, Michael. Happy to be with you today.
So let's just talk about you told me a bit about this before we hit record, the intersection of excited and scared, and with the extra pressure that you know is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's, thanks for that. I think it's interesting because we, as entrepreneurs, we all encounter these situations where we're breaking out, right? We wanted to do something that's not conventional. So, which is what led us to entrepreneurship. And I think if we look at this from the perspective of trying new things and diving into new opportunities, there should be some level of fear because it should stretch us, right? It shouldn't be within our comfort zone, all within the space that we're familiar with. I think if we do that, there'll be a certain level of scared, a certain level of trepidation. And I think when we do those things and we're married with the excitement of the opportunity. So if we're leaving our comfort zone, we're really excited about the potential, and we're scared because it is stretching us. It's pushing us beyond the limits of we're comfortable and we're safe. I think those two things kind of inform the latter part, which is that's, I think, when we know it's the right thing to do. You know, if we're at the point where we're excited and we're not scared, you know, it's probably okay, maybe to consider. If we're really scared and not excited, maybe we should move where we are. But if we're at the point where we're scared and excited at similar high levels, to me, that's a real tipping point for myself and for my clients about, you know, maybe you should consider this or really dig deeper into what are those things that are exciting you and scaring you. And I use that as a litmus test, frankly, for myself as well. That's when I know it's the right thing to do.
Yep. And I forgot to introduce you earlier, so I was probably too excited or scared or both. But you help out organizations who are having problems. You know, I want to call you an organizational shrink. I don't know if you'd want to take that title, but
you know, it's one of those things where I think so. I'm an organizational psychologist. I do leadership and innovation to help organizations function better, have happier employees, and be more profitable. So I think if I can do that, I feel like I did my job.
Yeah. So you probably come across this a fair amount that, you know,
yes,
leaders are not quite sure what to do, and maybe they're not used to going towards their fear.
It's not, because I think that many companies pay lip service to the fact that they support innovation, they support stretching boundaries, and then they hold you accountable to a very low tolerance for fear, for failure, for failure. So it's one thing to say it and to talk the talk, but you know, walking that talk is a whole different thing. And many leaders are, you know, driven by the metrics that drive organizations and don't have the leeway to really support innovation and really support growth through people leaving their comfort zones. They kind of walk the well-worn path. It's that old you know, analogy, which is like, I'll never get fired for hiring IBM. Back in the day, maybe I'm dating myself a bit, but you know, when people were looking for providers, there was all these new upstarts and interesting people coming around, but there was risk. You know, there was risk in going with a new provider, going with a new type of service. And if they chose the old mainstay, even if it failed, they couldn't be faulted. So I think that leaders today are at an inflection point of following through on what's important, both in terms of metrics and also important in terms of what's going to keep people happy and motivated. You know, I think employee engagement is at a crossroads now, particularly in the States, in Europe, and Middle East, and countries I work in Asia. I think it's at a crossroads in different cultures. I think cultures will influence this dramatically, and it's something I work within as well.
What are the two directions on this crossroad?
Well, it's pretty polar, right? I think one direction is to do the same thing and to bear the responsibility and the criticism of talking about change but not executing and following through. And the other side of this inflection point, which I think is going to reward companies and people and leaders, is following through, weathering those failures, learning from the mistakes, and carrying forward with a renewed sense of purpose, energy, and resolve to succeed. I think it's really either or of those two. I don't think there's a lot of middle ground, because middle ground is going to get swept up into the former, right? It's going to get swept up into the way things have always been.
And what's the problem with going down the road of the way things have always been? I mean, it sounds like a quite attractive road, really, to a lot of people.
Well, listen, there's moments and times, but there's a quote I always really like to remember, which is from Jack Welch, which says, "If the pace of change external is greater than the pace of change internally, then the end is near." The world we live in.
Whoa, wait a minute. The end is near? You mean the company might die?
I think that's a fair inference from that statement. Yes. But
Fortune 500 companies don't die, do they?
Well,
I mean, look at Kodak, famous billion-dollar company that went down the floor.
Look at Nokia. Look at the rates of the percentage of users in the mobile market in the 90s who were using Nokia. It was multiples of Apple and everyone else. And when Apple launched their iPhone, and then when Apple launched their iPhone, and then who was the second provider? Do you know? It was RIM.
Motorola, maybe?
It was BlackBerry. It was RIM, the research in motion.
Yeah.
So, neither of whom are a factor in a dramatic way these days. So I think there's plenty of examples, particularly in consumer products in the space, like you said, Kodak. If you look at the financial markets, like Lehman Brothers and Merrill Lynch and all the consolidations. And even if you look at other markets like fashion and I know I like to look at Cristal as it's a champagne brand out of Paris, and they didn't want to be affiliated with the whole rap culture and community because they felt it was bad for their brand. And that was the only thing keeping their brand at the level of sales it was. So, it's embracing your customer base, and driving it. But I think, there are many examples, as you said, of organizations, Fortune 100, Fortune 500, and the latter, who, didn't change, kind of stayed in where they were and died. If I told you in the 90s that Nokia would be gone, and they'd be on the air just shocked and hysterical about the company failing 20 years later, we wouldn't believe it because it was such a popular brand.
Right.
I think it's and if we take that as entrepreneurs and extrapolate that reality, we're all at risk, right? I think we're at risk of being comfortable and content with whatever we achieve, right? So we don't have the backstop of, it's 5 o'clock and it's time to go and I'm going to go take care of my own life and, whatever. We don't have the luxury of just walking away from it and just finding another thing and flipping a switch, because we're doing this because we're passionate about making differences in the world, making differences to the people that are our clients. And myself personally, helping people realize that there is a way to work happier and smarter around the world, and not be trapped by, as Steve Jobs said, trapped by dogma and just doing things because that's the way that we thought they should be done. So I think it's important.
Right. And part of the reason why this is even more important now, as you alluded to there, is that the pace of change is getting faster and faster every year. It's not like it was how the business was 20 or 30 years ago, where a change might take a few years to get rolled out. Now changes happen in a few months. Yeah.
If you think about this, the amount of information, there's a statistic, I won't misquote it, but I'll give you the gist, which is there's more information in the hand of a 10-year-old child with a smartphone than the president of the U.S. or the prime ministers of countries had just a couple of decades ago. So wow. It's incredible. And that's just growing, right? That's just the pace of change that we're dealing with is accelerating. So, it's like that. I'm sorry, I tend to speak in analogies at times, but it's like that analogy for life, which is like if you're walking on a moving sidewalk and you're just walking at a normal pace and you're walking against the sidewalk, you stay exactly where you are, right? If you don't walk, if you're not moving at all, you're going backwards. So in order to get ahead, you have to run. You have to be fast. So I think for leaders and for entrepreneurs, we run into those fears. We run into those, being scared and leaving something that may have produced some results for us in the past, but resting on our laurels is not an option. it's not an
Right,
option.
because the laurels are going backwards on this changed sidewalk.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's true. It's true, Michael.
Yeah.
Yep.
And one of the ways, we can move faster in business is to access our intuition and to do that openly. And that's why I champion that as a revolution in business, that
Yeah.
all business leaders do that.
I think it's one of the reasons why I was excited to speak with you today. And when we met recently is because I think that it's such a clearly, I hate to say this, but it's such a clearly intuitive, it's an of course moment when you talk to me about intuition and leadership. And the fact that people don't speak about it and don't recognize its power in how we work on a regular basis and how we think about our work as entrepreneurs, it's exciting. So your work is very interesting and exciting to me, which has led me to the opportunity and privilege to speak with you today. So I think that's, I think looking at the world changing more quickly, I think paying attention as entrepreneurs to what interests us and where we feel we're bringing our value and our unique value to our consumers and our customers. And maybe that evolves and changes. I remember, when I was a kid, I had an Apple II computer in the mid 70s. And if you told me then that, we'd have cell phones and smartphones and that the phone in my hand would be more powerful than the computer I had at that time, it's really exciting and oftentimes unpredictable. But think of it this way, if Apple rested on their laurels, none of this would be.
Right.
If they didn't take the chance, if they didn't fail with the Lisa, if they didn't fail with some of the other products, and learn from it and listen to their consumers. And I think that's the biggest fear, right? Because if we as entrepreneurs have a consumer base that we've built and cultivated over a long period of time or a short period of time, being true to them is important to us. And I think simultaneously we need to be open to new business ideas, new business opportunities, ways to serve our clients and our potential clients in a more complete way, which I think we all have the opportunity to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is not so much failing; it's not trying or not doing experiments or playing. And as long as the fail isn't as big enough to take your company down, preferably you have small failures to learn from them, so you can. I mean, it's sort of like the internal combustion engine has a lot of small explosions, many times a second, and it drives the car forward. Whereas if you kind of collected all that gasoline together and exploded at once, you'd have a problem.
Could be issue,
sure. Right. So the same thing with business. You want to have a lot of failures, but you want them to be small ones that kind of give you that impulse to keep moving forward, improving.
Absolutely.
There's probably a Japanese word for that, right?
It probably is.
Care, I'm forgetting it. I'll look it up and put it in the show notes.
Great.
But so, given that it's important to use intuition and not so many leaders use it, I guess because they're, why do you think people don't use their intuition openly? I mean, many famous business leaders have said they use intuition and follow their gut to get stuff done.
I think it's again, it goes back to one of our original points, which is it's a bit scary. It's a bit scary to operate in a connected way where it's not easy to demonstrate metrics that justify the choices and the expression of leadership. Because leadership is an art, if not more so than a science, in my opinion. So it's accumulating knowledge, of course. It's being able to connect with and work well with people, and it's an intersection of driving success through connection with people. And I think that being intuitive and trusting your intuition is something where most leaders are afraid of those failures, even if they're not big failures. They're afraid of being wrong. So I think this goes nicely into something we spoke about before record, which was it goes into that point where if we're afraid of leading with our intuition and we are afraid of being authentic and owning our own mistakes, our own flaws as leaders, I think it becomes a challenge for the people around us to take us from a place of trust and confidence. Because if a leader's never wrong, if a leader never admits,
if a leader's never wrong, his name is Stalin, I think. Didn't he go back to the newspapers and erase out anything where he could have been wrong in the past?
Yeah. So if you look at it that way, if a leader doesn't admit their own failures, how do they expect to build trust and to have their team take risks and risk failing? And I think that's where talking the talk and walking it become very different in terms of it's easy to say something and then go back to the way things always were. And I think that's one of the issues with clients is, I'll work with clients, and if they don't implement the changes that they've agreed to, then we have another conversation, because then it becomes, we're spending this time, we're investing time, energy, and money in promoting these changes that are positive, and everyone agrees. And then when push comes to shove, at the end of the day, when you have the path of least resistance, which is well worn, or you have the path that's going to be a little bit more of a challenge and more effort and a little bit less predictable, many leaders just by fact, it's almost without deciding, they just kind of let things flow. And then I revisit with them, and they say, well, we agree, but we just never really made it happen. Because, and then again, what they don't say is that I didn't follow my intuition. I knew it was going to be a mistake. And how many times have we heard that from clients, right? I knew it was going to be a mistake. Well, then why did you do it? Why did you do it? And we all have examples. I certainly have examples where I didn't listen to my intuition, and sometimes where my intuition was validated by trusted advisors or my dad or whomever, and I went with something that turned out to be the wrong decision. And I think we can, even if they're small things, but if they're small or large, we have the opportunity when decisions are made that turn out to be wrong, of letting it really drag us down and define us by the mistakes, or learning from it and rising above it and moving through to the potential that we have to not do that again. Right?
I think that's a great point. And what I recommend to people is just keep a journal on the decisions you made, whether you made them with your rational mind or your intuitive mind, or maybe you had a dream about it, or however you got the intuitive info. Or maybe your gut felt tight when you were interviewing that potential employee, and then you hired them anyway, and they kind of embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from your company, or whatever happened.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize in yourself what where you make your decisions from. And what parts of you're tapping into.
But people getting into this intuition stuff for the first time, it helps to keep track of what in decisions you made, where the intuitive nudges were, because you probably aren't going to be able to learn it in an afternoon. It's probably going to take a little while of practicing, and maybe you just keep to the existing rational path for a few months and see what the intuition says, but don't act on it. That's a safer way.
That's a great piece of advice. I think also it gives you the opportunity to try it on, right? To see how, if you're keeping track of your decisions and where they're coming from, if they're coming from rational intuition or something else, I think that it gives you the opportunity to kind of test it and see the times that you were right. And I think that, again, it's not even a matter of right or wrong, because you can follow the well-worn path and have it be fine. If fine is your goal, then you can have it be fine. I think the opportunity cost of that is not realizing the full potential you have to help your clients, to add value to your relationships professionally and personally, and also to move things from a place where it's fine. Fine to me is a source of angst, because it means that I'm operating from a place of fear, right? If I'm like, let's just leave everything the way it is. Let's just not try to do anything new. Let's not try to innovate. Let's not try to take all the accumulated information that we have from our customers and from our potential customers and say, how can I meet these needs? What are they telling me based on their behaviors, whether it be consumer behaviors, leadership behaviors? What are they telling me? What is my intuition telling me about how can I better serve them and be of more value to them, to help them? And then in consequence, of course, part of that help will be helping our businesses as well.
Right. And not only helping our business grow and our clients grow, but also helping our staff grow is another aspect of this.
Right.
Because
so I think that's a key point as a leader, right? So I think if we demonstrate that, if we kind of walk the talk and we show them that, we're willing to admit that we've made mistakes in the past, I think, again, failing forward fast is something that I see we have in our notes. And I think part of it is, let's try it and see if it works. I think there's so much deliberation and so much slow processes. And it's a real epidemic in business around the world, and in personal businesses as well, in our personal lives, where we know something is wrong, but we continue to persist in it because there's a momentum of living and a momentum of practice that it's almost more difficult with the inertia working there to change direction. So I think that, if we can embrace that opportunity to own it as a leader, we develop our people so much better. We build trust without asking for trust. I think I know leaders who ask for trust or demand trust, which is somewhat hilarious when you think about it, because it's not something that can be requested or demanded. It's something that happens, and it happens because as a leader, we're authentic. Like, we're finding our own authenticity and saying, yeah, I've made a mistake. I did something wrong, or I followed something I thought was to be right, whether it be intuitive or otherwise, and it didn't work out this time.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about authenticity in a little bit later in the show, but what about when you're doing this, you're this bold leader that, clearly you are, and other people envy you, or they think you're crazy, or they think both,
Yeah. That's a thing point, Michael. I think the schedule that I'll speak for myself. The schedule that I keep active is all over if I'm in the States in the East Coast and I have clients in Europe or Dubai or in the Middle East or Australia, certainly my time schedule is hectic. If I'm in the East Coast, my friends want to know if I'm working, because they may see a post at 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon of me, taking, I love photography, taking a photo and posting something to Instagram. And like, did you work today? And I said, well, yeah, if you'd like, I can text you at 1 o'clock in the morning when I start work. And the question then becomes, how do you have the freedom to live your life this way? How did you create this? Which there's no simple answer for anyone, right? We all have priorities, we all have ways of working that lend itself to things that we're good at and ways that we're willing to be uncomfortable. So for me, it's not the most comfortable reality, but it's a choice I make to be available to my clients when they need me to be available. I think the envy of it is usually based on the misperception that we have total freedom and total, blue sky every day. Because, oftentimes as leaders and as business people, particularly as entrepreneurs, we don't share the tough times. They see the flights to amazing places. They see the pictures from, some of the work and some of the client testimonials. But they don't see the background. They don't see the business development. They don't see the failures. They don't see the contracts and accounts that have not been won. So the envy is oftentimes misplaced. Sometimes, thankfully, it's placed well. I think, many people like to stick to the path, and they think you're crazy because you walked away from what job and you said no to this offer, or you fired a client who was a high-paying client who wasn't following the counsel and consultative advice that I give. I think that for me, if I have my friends, the people who know me best, when they think I'm crazy and they simultaneously envy what I'm building, then I kind of know that I'm doing the right thing. If I'm pushing things enough that my friends think it's totally out of the box, and they misperceive my schedule as being something that they envy, because most people don't choose this path. Let's be frank. There's a reason why people, when I finish and I have to go to the bank, I'm happy people work at the bank. It's a valuable, important service they provide. And so those people, when they see my life or my schedule, may think I'm crazy. They may wonder oh, how can you just be out at 3 o'clock or whatever time it is. But they also don't see me going to bed at 7:30 in the evening, afternoon, I was going to say, because I have to be up at 1 o'clock. So right. It's not always what it seems. I think it's important when you are building a business and when you're trying to break out of the normalcy of convention, that you have a thick skin about your family and friends and people surrounding you who may tell you that you're making a mistake. I have 2 kids in university, and I tell them oftentimes, you have to follow what you love, and you have to follow things that you're passionate about. And people may not agree with you, and I may not agree with you, but you still have to follow for yourself as a person what it is that's meaningful to you. So I think I encourage the crazy. I do. I encourage it in my kids. I encourage it in the clients. I think it's important to, if only in your mind, and you mentioned this very accurately when it comes to intuition, if you only exercise intuition in your mind and keep track of it, and then you can kind of compare and contrast where it is, and perhaps, see the opportunity you have to really harness your intuition to make better decisions. Not that it rules everything all the time, but it's a significant advantage if you incorporate that into your decision-making process.
Absolutely.
I
It's
think,
just a tool in your toolkit, just like spreadsheets are a tool.
yeah.
And, intuition is too. And
Yes, agreed.
just take them both in. I'm kind of wondering where people listening can buy a thick skin for business. Is that, or how did you get that? How do you become neutral? By thick skin, I assume you mean you're just neutral to what other people say. You notice it, you take it in, but you're not going to get upset about it.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of, EQ or emotional intelligence is a piece of it. And listen, I'll be the first to admit that I have my flaws, and I have moments where it's easier than other times to practice what I preach when it comes to this. I think part of it, and I had a client ask me recently, like, how do you remain so calm in the face of such tumultuous, hectic, urgencies at work with clients? And I think some of it is just breathing through it and realizing that, this is very important, but no one's going to die and no one's going to jail, right? So it's important, but, let's take it rationally, because I don't think any decisions that are made in haste or that are made frenetically really have a foundation of success in the long term. I think unless we stop and take a beat and think about things holistically and apply, our toolkit, other metrics, intuition, our experiences, certainly, I think it's important. And for me personally, to your question, we all have our stories, and I certainly have mine. And I think going through events and work events in my life that were tumultuous, that were unexpected, and I think we all make mistakes, either by commission or omission. I think just surviving those and picking yourself up and continuing forward, I think that provides itself some inertia and momentum to the fact that this too shall pass. And, the way that I can address this and learn from it and not repeat the same mistakes is really going to be more defining of myself and my career and my leadership abilities than whatever mistakes I made in my past. It's something I firmly believe in. It's something I encourage my clients to believe in as well.
And I think Tim Ferriss is pretty inspirational on this. He tries out all kinds of things and screws them up and shares what happened. So,
Absolutely.
And I remember in his original 4-Hour Workweek book, he said one of the exercises he did, he'd go out in if it was in a cafe or whatever, and he'd just lie down on the ground.
He mentioned that. Yeah.
just to overcome the fear of what other people might think. And he'd lie there for 10 seconds, then get up.
Yeah. I think to your point about that, I think it's very basic. So if you respect and admire a person or a leader and their opinion is shared with you, and you choose to hear it and internalize it, that's valuable and that's important. If it's just noise, and one of the great opportunities and one of the great challenges of the world we live in the media that we work within, is that we invite a ton of criticism and a ton of anonymous critiques. And at the end of the day, I have several people I know who are well known, and they just don't read the comments. They just don't want to see it. Then you have others that take it in and really internalize it at times. And at the end of the day, listen, like I've seen great comments, I've seen horrible comments. I've seen comments that are forward-looking. I've seen comments that are, past-focused. And at the end of the day, you're responsible for today. You're responsible for right now. And you're responsible, and your opportunity is, what are you going to do after this point forward? Not to get too Buddhist on it, but all you have is right now. So I think that's a point I try to stress, and I think that's where intuition comes into play, which is, you have accumulated life previous to right this moment. And I think that informs so much, and relying on your intuition, which I think is a manifestation of so many things that you've experienced in your life. I think it's important. I think it's a critical voice to hear in your toolbox, as we talked about.
Yeah. And it sounds like all of these things you're talking about really help with navigating being an unconventional person.
Yeah, I think so.
Entrepreneur generally is unconventional.
Yeah, it's true. We all have that opportunity. It's also applicable, let's be clear, it's also applicable to people who have, more conventional 9-to-5 lives. I think the tip that you gave is incredibly valuable. Keep track of your decisions and where those decisions came from. And then kind of check in with yourself. And I think, again, going back to my quotes, I think it was Socrates, like living an unexamined life is not worth living. I think, I think most people don't examine the lives that they live. So I think when you stop and sit back and you say, okay, this is how I'm spending my time. These are my goals. Are they aligned? Am I working towards my goals with how I choose to spend my every day? Or are my goals here and my life's like somewhere floating into the other directions?
Or
So I think,
in some cases, do I even have goals?
right. I think most people are just kind of going through the motions on a daily basis. They don't examine their situation. They don't check in. And those are the people I see and I work with who, frankly, are hugely successful financially. They're incredibly miserable in their jobs, and it trickles into every part of their life. So it's not about the money necessarily. It's about how aligned is your life with what you feel important and how your intuition is telling you to be. I think that those are opportunities that are missed by a great number of people. So intuitive leadership and intuitive learning and intuition itself, no matter what you do for your life, no matter what your choice is, whether you work or don't work, or you have a 9-to-5, or you're entrepreneurial, or you're truly nomadic, trusting your intuition and checking in with it often will only benefit you. There's no downside to it. And there's not many things where there's no downside to it. Like, this is a true, it's only going to benefit you when you check in with yourself. But again, it requires a certain amount of embracing of fear and embracing the unknown and vulnerability, which I think a lot of people tend to throw smoke schemes around different parts of our life for different reasons.
So I met you at a conference, and you decided to invest quite a lot of time and money to go to that, as did I. Yep. How did you overcome that fear of investing in yourself, Jonscott?
I think it's a great point. Thank you for that question. I think a lot of it has to do with, to a degree, not to a degree, I think time is the most valuable commodity. It's all we have to trade for the life that we want to live, and the people we want to spend time with, and people that are important to us, and things that we love to do. So for me, I had been doing a bit of research and a bit of exploring. And then I have to thank Jackie Netchell, who was a speaker at this particular conference at DNX. And I think when I found out she was going, and I knew I was going to be in Europe at that time, I carved out the time around there to leave it open. And I kind of left it open. I didn't book it. I kind of left it open for a bit because it was a big investment in time and money. And I could be doing other things. I could have spent more time with my family or friends. I had other uses, like we all do, for the actual financial investment. And I thought at the end of the day, it comes back to kind of practicing what you preach, right? Like I'm saying earlier, I always tell clients that they need to check in and they need to invest in their own skills and their own ability to learn new things. So for me, it came down to that crossroads of saying, all right, I'm not really sure. I think it's the right thing to do. I'm excited about this. And I'm always a bit trepidatious in spending money. But I decided for those reasons, like we originally said, it was the right thing to do. And it was, truly. And I think many of us don't hit pause, or not even pause. Like pause is a more dramatic stop. But they don't kind of grab stuff onto their life. And our lives are moving so fast. I think they don't take on new things or learn new skills because we're meeting our clients' needs. We're delivering services. We're, plugging along in our own entrepreneurial ways. And I think, learning new things. And my friend said to me, "What are you going to do there?" I said, "I'm going to listen." And that's an amazing gift. I say this to my kids and they give me the dad look. But they're in university and every day they're in class learning things they didn't know before right then. And as we go through our lives and get into the work world, oftentimes we don't have that opportunity, or we have to really seek out those opportunities to learn. So the conference we went to was an amazing opportunity to just, I think it was Will Rogers, never miss a good opportunity to shut up. So I think, just listening and hearing people's stories, and, everyone takes different things away. I think that it's important to say, what is it that you love? How is it that your skills can be evolved or upskilled or changed? Or, I think if we stay true to the things that we're passionate about, and then clients will see that. And I think clients will come from those experiences as well. So yeah, it's something I struggle with, truly. Like, and I'm making a bigger leap now with some new business ideas, and I think, and it's a bit terrifying, but it is. It's literally, you know, I'm super excited, like high level excited, and I'm high level terrified, and I'm like, it's definitely the right thing to do. It's important.
All
Listen to
right.
that myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way to decide, I think, if it's something that
Yeah.
excites you and it scares you. So that's
Yes.
a good
Agreed.
way to overcome that. So let's talk about authenticity, and why that's so important to business intuition.
Yeah, it's a great segue. I think that it goes to the point where people can hear and intellectually they can process why it's important to be authentic and to be present and to be vulnerable in a way. And I think there's authenticity and vulnerability are so closely tied. And if you practice authenticity and you are present with your employees and you're present with yourself and you admit the things that you do well and need help on, I think that it serves you better as an individual. It leads you to a more truly intuitive experience, because if you're lying to yourself on a daily basis, and then you're trying to tap into authenticity or tap into intuition, excuse me, you're basing that intuitive plug-in based on a false story and a false narrative. So unless we're authentic with ourselves, this is just internal. Unless we're real with what we are and what we're good at and what we need help with, if we try to tap into that toolbox and pull some intuition out, intuition is going to be tainted, in my opinion, by this false narrative that we're living in or telling ourselves. So I think being authentic, you know, again, it's much easier said than done. It's difficult because it requires courage, it requires risk, and it requires embracing uncertainty to a degree. And I think that if we do those things, we'll be happier with our work. We'll be happier with our life. And I think there's a lot of pressure, right? Authenticity is a huge buzzword right now in a lot of different communities. And I think what it leads to is this, you know, this almost false authenticity or a fake authenticity with some folks, in a sense.
Where can I buy fake authenticity?
Yeah, listen, I'm sure if I do a Google search or an Amazon search, something somewhere. But I think that it's, you know, I think that it goes back to what I said earlier, which is checking in on yourself, you know, checking in on who it is that you are and what is important to you and what are the guiding principles and decisions that are guiding your life and your decisions. And I think when you're real with yourself, and again, this is, I have to be, you know, candid. This is not something I'm always good at. You know, I often have moments of I have to kind of catch myself and saying, well, that's not what I really want. I just think that's maybe what I should be doing. So if you're ruling your life by the shoulds and not by the authentic, you know, it's a recipe for you know, living suboptimally, I think, or living a life that is not authentic will give you a lot more headaches in the long run, both in terms of how you operate your business. The intuition that you tap into is going to be kind of skewed based on this false narrative. And the work that you do is not going to be as aligned to who you are truly as a person. So I think that's an important piece to think about and to practice. I think, as you said about, I keep coming back to this because it's such a great idea, keeping track of where your decisions come from. If they're coming from, you know, metrics, or if they're coming from intuition, I think keeping track of, you know, how you live and what decisions you make, and if they're authentic, like checking in, are they authentic? Give them a score. You know, like, you know,
an authenticity score.
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity, right? I think that give it a score. Like if you say, you know, Brene Brown has a great quote. It says, choose discomfort over resentment. And if you have things to do at work and you're following up and it's important to you and you feel like you're really in your authenticity, and someone says, hey, could you help me with this and come over here and do this? Our reflex, most of us, is to say, sure, I'll help you. And you put what you're doing on the back burner, and then you silently resent the fact that you didn't get a chance to do what you wanted to do. And it's not being rude. It's not being a team player. You can certainly be a team player. And I think the irony in that, and she speaks about this in a couple of her books, is it gives you the opportunity to be respected for your boundaries. Right? So if we're authentic and we listen to our authenticity and we set boundaries based on what we find connecting to us as leaders and individuals and entrepreneurs, and I say to you, Mike, I'd love to help you, but I'm going to be busy with clients. Can we make the time a little bit later? Well, yeah, of course. You're going to respect the fact that I'm doing work, and I respect the fact that you're doing work. Saying yes all the time is not the way to be. And I think,
it's not the road to authenticity. The road to authenticity isn't paved with yeses.
No, it's true. And again, if you're living an authentic life, and again, we challenge all in this, like I challenge to do this in many respects. And I keep challenging myself and checking in. If you do this, you're going to piss people off. Like the world doesn't respond well to boundaries and to no's. And I think it's one of those things where if you're, and even Oprah Winfrey said this recently, or said this years ago, I just read it recently, which if you're intending to be real and to be authentic, expect to piss people off because you're not just reflecting, you're owning more time and you're being authentic to the things that are important to you. So yeah, I like that idea, Michael, of an authenticity score. It doesn't have to be a 1 to 10. It could be, a 4-point scale, like lower than average, average, higher than average. Like am I in 1 to 3, am I skewed positive? Am I skewed negative? Or am I kind of in the middle? I think, we can talk more about that.
Yeah. And also I think it's a great idea. I appreciate you suggesting that to us. And, at the end of the day, if you're not authentic, you're just going to not have a successful business because, reality doesn't treat too kindly in authenticity in the long run. You can get away with it for a little while, but. Precisely.
And you can, I think people can go through the motions, but, the truth is going to come out, and that's one surety of being inauthentic. You can't fake it forever.
And I know you're quite into sports. You've done an Ironman and a marathon and what have you, and that's another arena where, if you're not keeping up with the speed, it's kind of really obvious.
Well, yeah. No, listen, I've done a full Ironman, several half, and New York City Marathon, and I'm a slow guy. So for me, I think it was an invaluable lesson in learning about persistence and about not trying. I could never be a fast person, but the goal to me was seemingly insurmountable when I first considered it. And I think it kind of informs a lot of things that I do in my life, which is, if something seems crazy and impossible, I want to learn more about it. How I can, so I think that particularly when it comes to how we embrace life outside of work, whether it be sport, art, culture, travel, and for me, all of the above. Where does that come into play? I think one of the reasons why I derive so much value from the seminar, the workshop that we met in, because I think people were showing up as themselves, and the community of entrepreneurs that we were with, that was miraculous to experience, frankly, because the world doesn't work that way in general. So to be around several hundred people who were, pretty much living their, authentic selves, it's incredible, so, and it's inspirational for me not to make excuses for myself to not be authentic, right? I think that if we follow the examples around us on a day-by-day basis in our own worlds, we see a lot of inauthenticity. And I think being around people, and that's why I think a community is so important.
Absolutely.
I think a community like you've built with your show here, I think community that we experienced in Portugal together, I think that it's important to check in with people who are like-minded. I think that's a really valuable tool, because let's be frank, I just gave a talk this morning, and it's sometimes lonely and isolating to be entrepreneurial and to follow your own path. Whether your spouse or kids or friends or family or acquaintances, like they just think they think you're crazy. They think how do you ever work? Because I don't see you working. If they don't see you following the normal patterns of what work is to them, they don't know when you work. They're not, so I think that it's important to check in. It's important to really test your limits of living an authentic life. It's going to be weird. It's going to be uncomfortable. It doesn't get better. You get used to it. And that's the final analogy I'll make about Ironman is my dad just couldn't understand it, and He goes, I don't understand. He goes, explain to me what it's like. And I said, you know, when you're doing something physically and you have to stop because you feel like you're going to die. I said, you have to get to that point and back it down a fraction and then stay there for 12 hours on that razor's edge, you know. But I think when you do that, like anything else, like I said earlier, like, you know, you prove that, you know, it's survivable and you're stronger for the experience. So, you know, I think that's an important takeaway.
Excellent. So if people want to find you online, well, I think you're in transition right now between websites.
Yeah, we're redoing the website now. So I think for me, the best way is to go to Jonscott Turco at LinkedIn. My first name is fairly unique, Jonscott.
Yes, I've never met another one.
Yeah, you probably won't. There's one more I met on LinkedIn. He's a retired nice gentleman in Carolinas. Yeah. But that's probably the best way, or on Facebook, similarly, you know, obviously under my name. And then I'll keep track of the contacts and then inform the viewers and listeners as to the new launches of the websites.
Fabulous.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great pleasure talking with you about, you know, being excited and scared at the same time, Jonscott.
Yep, I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for everyone listening. Thanks, Mike.